Today, we are diving into a really fascinating report from the World Economic Forum, and it asks a huge question. Could artificial intelligence actually forge a completely new economic path for Latin America? So to really get why AI could be such a game changer, you first have to understand the core problem the region's up against. For decades, Latin America has been kind of stuck in a productivity trap. And this chart, well, it tells the whole story. For the last 20 years, the economy in Latin America has mostly grown by just adding more people to the workforce. It hasn't really grown by making each worker more efficient. And you can see it right there. That workforce growth bar just towers over the tiny productivity growth bar next to it. That's been the engine. But here's the thing. That engine is starting to run out of gas. With birth rates falling, populations getting older, the region just can't count on having an ever-expanding labor force anymore. It needs a new way to grow, and it needs it fast. And that brings us right to the potential solution, artificial intelligence. The report doesn't just see this as another new gadget. It sees it as a real, honest-to-goodness chance to rewrite the region's whole economic story. I mean, this quote really nails it. We're not talking about a small upgrade here. The report is comparing AI to electricity or the internet. These are technologies that completely remade the world as we knew it. That is the potential scale we're talking about. Okay, so what does that actually look like in terms of money? Well, the report estimates that AI could add up to, get this, $1.7 trillion in economic value to Latin America. And that's not a one-time thing. That's every single year. A number that big could really tackle that deep productivity problem we were just talking about. And this value, it's not magic. It comes from AI directly hitting that productivity issue head on. Just think about it. Automating all the mind-numbing paperwork in an office, or maybe helping an engineer spot tiny flaws in a blueprint way faster. It frees up people, right? It frees up our brains to focus on strategy, creativity, and innovation, all the stuff that humans are actually great at. Okay, but here's the catch. And it's a big one. There is a huge gap between what's possible with AI and what's actually happening on the ground in Latin America right now. Which, of course, leads to the big question. If there's a $1.7 trillion opportunity just sitting there, why isn't the region grabbing it with both hands? What's the holdup? Well, this chart here tells a lot of the story. You see all the hype around AI, right? But look at that number. Just 6%. Only 6% of organizations in Latin America say they're getting any significant value from it. So there's this massive disconnect between trying AI and actually making it work for you. And the reason for that gap seems to be that most companies are still just kind of dipping their toes in the water. They might be using AI for a little experiment here, a personal productivity tool there, but they're not using it to fundamentally rethink how their business actually operates. So what's the single biggest thing holding them back from that kind of transformation? Well, the report looked at Latin America versus the global leaders in AI, and one thing stood out way more than anything else. It wasn't about strategy. It wasn't even about the technology. It was about talent. This talent gap, it's the number one barrier. It's a straight-up shortage of people with the right skills. We're talking about the data scientists, the engineers, the AI specialists, the people who can actually build these amazing tools and then scale them up across the whole economy. And it's not just a talent problem. The report points to a few other big hurdles, too. Things like a digital divide, a big gap in internet access between cities and rural areas. A serious lack of investment. The region gets less than 2% of all global AI funding. And then there's regulation, which over half of leaders say is just too unclear to make big bets. So yeah, the challenges are pretty significant. But the good news is the report doesn't just list the problems. It actually lays out a clear roadmap for how to move forward and build what it calls the intelligent age. So how do we get from here to there? The World Economic Forum breaks it down into 4 key actions. First, countries need to create smart strategies, a focused national plan for AI. Second, they have to build the foundation. That's all the digital infrastructure and data systems that AI needs to run. Third, and this is probably the most important one, they have to invest in people to close that huge talent gap. And finally, none of this works without collaboration. Governments, universities, private companies all have to be working together. Now, a really important part of that smart strategy idea is to not try to do everything at once. The report argues that the best approach is to focus AI on the industries where Latin America already has a big advantage on the world stage. And you know what? We're already seeing some pretty amazing examples of this. In agriculture, you've got drones using AI to make farming way more precise. In Chile's mining industry, AI is helping make operations safer and more efficient. And in banking, AI models are approving loans in an instant, which is a huge deal for bringing more people into the financial system. The potential is definitely there when you apply it strategically. Okay, so we've looked at the problem, the incredible potential, and the plan to get there. So what are the key things you should walk away with from all this? If you remember just 3 things, make it these. First, the opportunity is absolutely immense. We're talking about $1.7 trillion to fix an economic problem that's been around for decades. Second, the biggest barrier isn't the technology, it's the people. Closing that talent gap has to be priority number 1. And third, success is not going to happen by accident. It needs a real coordinated plan, not just a bunch of scattered small-scale experiments. And that really leaves us with this one final critical question. Historically, the region has fallen behind in past technological waves. The stakes this time are incredibly high. The question is, can leaders across Latin America come together to make sure that this time the story has a different ending?